The bank teller smirks as she watches the old man's hands shake while trying to sign his check. "Sir, you need to step aside if you can't control your trembling. You're holding up the line." 84-year-old Robert "Tank" Sullivan tries to steady his Parkinson's-affected hands, feeling the cruel laughter from the customers behind him. His worn Marine's cap sits crooked on his gray head, and his service pin catches the fluorescent light. None of these people know that those same trembling hands once carried wounded Marines to safety under enemy fire in Korea. They have no idea that in just minutes, everything they think they know about this shaking old man is about to change forever. Before we dive into Tank's incredible story, hit that subscribe button if you believe our veterans deserve respect. And drop a comment below. Have you ever witnessed someone being cruel to an elderly person? Let's honor these heroes together. Now here's what happened next. Robert Sullivan had been fighting Parkinson's disease for 3 years now. The tremors came and went, sometimes barely noticeable, other times making simple tasks nearly impossible. Today was one of the bad days. He'd served 2 tours in Korea, earned a Purple Heart and Bronze Star, then worked 35 years as a mechanic after the war. But all anyone saw now was a shaky old man who took too long at the bank counter. Tank lived alone in a small apartment downtown. His wife Betty had passed 5 years ago, and his only son lived across the country. The monthly trip to deposit his pension check was one of his few outings, a simple task that had become increasingly difficult. The First National Bank was crowded that Tuesday morning. Tank took his place in line, gripping his check and deposit. Slip carefully. His hands were shaking worse than usual, making his writing look like a child's scribbles. When his turn came, the young teller looked annoyed before he even approached the counter. She glanced at his trembling hands and rolled her eyes. "This is going to take forever," she muttered to her colleague. Tank tried to slide his check across the marble counter, but his shaking hands knocked over the pen holder. Pens scattered across the floor with a loud clatter. The people in line behind him started getting restless. A woman in an expensive suit checked her watch dramatically. A businessman in the back called out loudly, "Can we get someone who can actually function up there?" Laughter rippled through the line. Tank's face burned with embarrassment as he bent down slowly to pick up the pens, his knees protesting with each movement. The teller made no effort to help. Instead, she spoke louder so everyone could hear. "Sir, maybe you should have someone else handle your banking if this is too difficult for you." More laughter erupted from the crowd. Tank straightened up, his dignity hanging by a thread. He'd faced Chinese artillery fire with less fear than he felt standing in this bank lobby. A young man with a phone started filming, probably planning to post the shaky old veteran online for entertainment. "Look at this guy," he whispered loudly to his friend. "Can't even hold a pen steady." The businessman pushed forward in line. "Hey Gramps, maybe it's time to consider a nursing home. You're clearly not capable of handling basic adult tasks anymore." Tank's jaw tightened. He'd heard similar words from doctors, from his own nephew, from well-meaning neighbors. But hearing it from strangers, surrounded by their cruel laughter, cut deeper than any enemy bullet ever had. The teller grew more impatient. "Sir, I'm going to have to ask you to step aside and let the next customer proceed. You can come back when you're better prepared to complete your transaction." Tank felt completely alone, surrounded by people who saw him as nothing more than a broken-down old man. His hands shook harder as stress made the Parkinson's symptoms worse. That's when the bank's heavy glass doors opened with authority. A tall man in a crisp military uniform stepped inside. His chest displayed rows of ribbons and medals that immediately caught everyone's attention. The eagles on his shoulders marked him as a full colonel in the United States Marine Corps, but it was the man behind him who made the entire bank fall silent. Marine General Patricia Hayes walked through those doors like she owned the building. 3 stars gleamed on her uniform, and her presence commanded instant respect from everyone in the lobby. She was followed by 2 more Marines in dress blues. The general's eyes swept the room and immediately found Tank standing at the counter. His Marine Corps cap and service pin clearly visible despite his hunched posture. Without hesitation, General Hayes walked directly to the teller counter. Her voice carried the authority of someone used to being obeyed without question. "Excuse me," she said to the teller, "but I couldn't help but notice you're having difficulty assisting this Marine veteran." The teller's face went white. She started stammering an explanation about difficult customers and bank policies. General Hayes held up a hand, silencing her immediately. She turned to face the crowd of customers who had been laughing moments before. "Ladies and gentlemen," she announced in a voice that filled the entire lobby, "I'd like you to meet Gunnery Sergeant Robert Sullivan, United States Marine Corps. This man served 2 tours in Korea, where he earned the Purple Heart for wounds received in combat and the Bronze Star for heroic action under fire." The bank lobby was now completely silent. You could hear the air conditioning humming. General Hayes continued, her voice growing stronger. "Sergeant Sullivan once carried 3 wounded Marines to safety during the Battle of Heartbreak Ridge while under heavy enemy fire. He saved those men's lives despite taking shrapnel in his own leg and arm. The trembling you see today isn't weakness. It's the result of a neurological condition that affects millions of Americans, including many of our bravest veterans." Tank stood straighter, his Marine training taking over despite his shaking hands. The general wasn't finished. She walked closer to the businessman who had suggested the nursing home. "Sir, this veteran has sacrificed more for your freedom than you could possibly imagine. His service to this country continued long after his military career ended. He volunteered at VA hospitals, mentored young Marines, and worked as a mechanic keeping this community's vehicles running for over 3 decades. The businessman's face was red with shame. He stared at the floor, unable to meet anyone's eyes. General Hayes then addressed the young man with the phone. "Son, I suggest you delete whatever video you were planning to post and consider how you'd feel if someone mocked your grandfather." For a medical condition he couldn't control, the phone disappeared immediately into the young man's pocket. Finally, the general turned back to the teller. "Ma'am, I'm sure you'll be happy to assist Sergeant Sullivan with his banking needs. Take all the time he requires, and provide him with the respect he's earned through his service to this nation." The teller nodded frantically, and immediately began processing Tank's deposit with careful attention and patience. But General Hayes had one more surprise. She reached into her briefcase and pulled out an official-looking folder. "Sergeant Sullivan," she said formally, "I have the honor of presenting you with something that's long overdue." She opened the folder to reveal a presidential unit citation that Tank's unit had earned in Korea, but never received due to military bureaucracy. The general explained that she'd been tracking down Korean war veterans to present their missing awards. "This citation recognizes the extraordinary heroism and service of your unit during some of the fiercest fighting of the Korean War. Your country has never forgotten your sacrifice, and neither have your fellow Marines." Tank's trembling hands accepted the citation with dignity. Tears ran down his weathered cheeks as General Hayes rendered a crisp military salute, which Tank returned with all the precision his condition would allow. The entire bank lobby erupted in applause. The same people who had been laughing at his trembling were now clapping with genuine respect and admiration. The businessman approached Tank with sincere apologies. The young man with the phone shook the veteran's hand and thanked him for his service. Even the teller came around the counter to personally apologize for her treatment. General Hayes spent several more minutes talking with Tank about his service, his unit, and the men he'd served alongside. She treated him not as a disabled old man, but as the war hero he truly was. As the general prepared to leave, she made one final announcement to the gathered crowd. "This Marine taught younger soldiers that true strength isn't measured by steady hands or quick reflexes. It's measured by courage under fire, loyalty to your brothers, and willingness to sacrifice for others. Sergeant Sullivan embodies all of those qualities, and I'm honored to call him my fellow Marine. After the military delegation left, Tank completed his banking transaction with the utmost courtesy from every bank employee. Other customers approached him throughout the morning, asking about his service and thanking him for his sacrifice. The story spread quickly through the small city. By evening, Tank had received calls from old Marine buddies, local veterans groups, and community leaders wanting to honor his service. But the moment that meant the most came 3 days later when a young Marine in dress blues knocked on Tank's apartment door. The Marine explained that General Hayes had shared Tank's story with active duty troops, inspiring a new generation of Marines to understand that their service and sacrifice would be remembered and honored throughout their lives. Tank Sullivan learned that day that respect isn't lost just because your hands shake or your steps are slower. Sometimes it takes the right person walking through the door to remind everyone that heroes come in all conditions, and that true service to country never fades. No matter how many years have passed, the trembling in his hands continued, but Tank carried himself differently after that day. He stood taller, walked with more confidence, and never again apologized for the medical condition that reminded everyone of the price some people pay for freedom. And whenever young people saw him around town, they didn't see a shaky old man anymore. They saw exactly what General Hayes had shown them, a Marine veteran whose courage and sacrifice had earned him respect that would last a lifetime.